The rain lashed my face like a whip. I stood on the shoulder of the interstate, watching the taillights of that familiar black SUV disappear into the downpour. My left cheek burned, and I could taste iron in my mouth. My knee throbbed from where it had hit the pavement when I was pushed out of the car. "You better remember this, you old hag. You pull this again, and you'll be sleeping in a dumpster." The image of my daughter-in-law, Jessica, screaming those words at me from the rolled-down window was seared into my mind. In my 69 years of life, I never thought I'd be abandoned on the side of a highway by my own son. How did it come to this? I wiped the mix of rain and tears from my face, my mind reeling back to just a few hours ago. Today was my grandson Leo's 6th birthday. I'd woken up extra early to make his favorite meal, a slow-cooked pot roast and creamy mashed potatoes, packed it all into insulated containers, and took 2 different city buses for nearly 2 hours to get to their house. Ever since my husband passed away 5 years ago, my son, Michael, and his family had become my entire world. "Mom, why did you take the bus again?" "I told you we'd come pick you up," Michael said as he opened the door. He frowned when he saw the containers in my hands. "You brought more food? The fridge is already packed." I managed a weak smile. "Leo loves it, and it gives me something to do." Jessica walked out of the bedroom, her lips curling into a tight line when she saw what I was holding. "Mom, we're trying to follow a scientifically backed diet for him. All that butter and salt in your cooking isn't good for his development." Her words felt like a needle to my heart, but I kept the smile plastered on my face. A little treat once in a while won't hurt. Just then, Leo ran over and hugged my legs. "Grandma, I want pot roast." Jessica immediately pulled him away. "Go wash your hands first," she instructed, then lowered her voice to me. "Mom, please don't always spoil him like this." I opened my mouth to respond but said nothing. This wasn't the first time. Ever since Leo was born, the clashes over our parenting philosophies had grown more frequent. She was all about modern, gentle parenting methods she'd read about in books, while I just thought a child needed some good old-fashioned home cooking and an extra sweater when it was cold. The birthday dinner was at a fancy downtown restaurant. I felt a knot in my stomach just looking at the prices on the menu. A single meal here cost more than my entire weekly budget. Leo spent the entire time glued to a tablet, watching cartoons, while Jessica and Michael occasionally spoon-fed him a bite. I wanted to say that staring at a screen while eating was bad for his digestion, but I remembered our earlier exchange and forced myself to swallow the words. On the way home, the rain started. I sat in the back with Leo, who had fallen asleep beside me. Soft music played through the speakers as Michael and Jessica murmured to each other in the front. Staring at the blurred city lights, I found myself thinking about Michael's childhood. We were poor back then. For his birthday, the best I could do was add a fried egg to his noodles, but he would eat it with such pure joy. "Mom, what are you thinking about now?" Jessica's voice pulled me back to the present. "Look at the way Leo's sleeping. It's because you've spoiled him. He can't fall asleep unless someone is right next to him now." That was the last straw. "It's perfectly normal for a child to need a sense of security," I snapped. "When Michael was little, he also—" "Here we go again," Jessica's voice shot up. "Can you please stop applying your outdated ideas to our lives? Times have changed." "Mom, Jessica studied child psychology," Michael chimed in. "Just listen to her." A wave of indignation washed over me. You were just what?" Jessica twisted around in her seat, her eyes gleaming in the dim light of the car. "You just think we don't know how to raise our own child, is that it? Do you know what Leo's piano teacher said? That he has trouble concentrating. It's because you're always feeding him that junk food." "How is my cooking junk food?" My voice began to tremble. "When Michael was a kid—" "Shut up!" Michael roared. The car swerved violently. "It's always, when Michael was a kid, when Michael was a kid. Are you ever going to stop?" I was stunned into silence. In his entire life, Michael had never, not once, yelled at me like that. Tears welled up in my eyes. "What are you crying for now?" Jessica sneered. "You resort to tears every time you can't win an argument. Who are you trying to look pathetic for?" Just then, the shouting woke Leo, and he started to wail. Jessica immediately turned to soothe him, muttering, "See? Now you've woken him up." Michael pulled the car over onto the emergency shoulder. Before I could even process what was happening, he turned around, and the back of his hand struck my face. "Mom, can you just give it a rest?" His face, illuminated by the passing headlights, looked like a stranger's. "You're always criticizing, always telling us what to do. We don't need you running our lives." I clutched my cheek, too shocked to speak. Was this the son I had worked my fingers to the bone to raise? The same boy who would bring me an umbrella in the rain and stay by my bedside all night when I was sick? "Get out," Michael said, his voice cold as ice. "What?" I thought I had misheard him. I said, "Get out. Go cool off," he ordered. He unbuckled his seatbelt, walked around to my side, and yanked the door open. I stumbled out of the car, my legs shaking. Before I could find my footing, Michael threw my handbag out after me and slammed the door shut. Jessica rolled down her window to deliver her final, heart-shattering blow. "You better remember this, you old hag. You pull this again, and you'll be sleeping in a dumpster." And then they drove away, leaving me alone in the torrential downpour, soaked to the bone, my heart ripped to shreds. The rain fell harder. I trudged along the shoulder of the highway, my steps heavy. My phone was in my purse, but I was afraid to use it. The last time I had called Michael to tell him he was working too many hours and needed to take care of himself, Jessica had accused me of interfering in their lives. Water droplets blurred my glasses, making it impossible to see clearly. Cars sped past, spraying me with dirty water. Not a single one stopped to ask if the drenched old woman needed help. How had the world become so cold? After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a sign for a rest stop. My legs were screaming in protest, but I gritted my teeth and pushed forward. The lights of the service plaza were a warm beacon in the stormy night, my only glimmer of hope. I must have been a terrifying sight when I pushed open the door to the convenience store. The young girl behind the counter gasped. "Oh my God, ma'am, what happened to you?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the world went black, and I collapsed on the floor. I awoke on a small cot, covered with a dry blanket. My wet clothes had been replaced. A woman who looked to be in her 50s was sitting beside me. "You're awake," she said, smiling as she handed me a cup of hot water. "You gave us quite a scare. You passed out in the store with a high fever." I struggled to sit up, my body aching all over. "Thank you." "Where am I?" "You're at the highway rest stop." "I'm Brenda, the night manager," she said, helping me adjust my pillow. "We've called for an ambulance, but the rain is making the roads treacherous, so it might be a while." I shook my head. "No, don't worry about it. I'm fine," I said, trying to get up. Brenda gently pushed me back down. "Don't be stubborn. You were out in that storm for who knows how long. You need to get checked out." She hesitated for a moment. "How did you end up walking on the highway by yourself in weather like this?" The tears started flowing again. For some reason, I told this complete stranger everything. When I got to the part about my son slapping me, Brenda gasped. When I told her they had left me on the highway, she slammed her hand on the table in anger, and when I repeated my daughter-in-law's final words, her own eyes grew red. "Bastards," Brenda seethed. "I have a son. If he ever dared to treat me like that, I'd break both his legs." I shook my head with a bitter smile. It was my fault. I shouldn't always be meddling. "Bullshit," Brenda swore. "You're his mother. You have every right to say what you think. They use you when they need you, then kick you to the curb when they don't." I fell silent. She was right. After Leo was born, I had gone from being a mother to being a nuisance, an old woman poisoning their precious son with outdated ideas. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Brenda asked suddenly. I froze. My keys were in my purse, but my purse must have fallen on the highway when Michael threw it out. "Go back to them?" I shuddered, the image of Jessica's venomous glare flashing in my mind. "I thought so," Brenda sighed. "Look, how about this? When my shift is over, you can come stay with me for a few days, just until you figure things out." I looked at her, my heart filled with gratitude. I couldn't possibly impose. "Don't be silly. We all get old," she said, patting my hand. "My own mom passed away last year. Seeing you, it just reminds me of her." And just like that, I went to live with Brenda. Her husband had passed away years ago. My fever spiked to 103 degrees, and Brenda took time off work to care for me. 3 days later, the fever broke. As I sat on Brenda's small balcony, soaking in the sun, I watched the elderly people below doing Tai Chi, walking their dogs, and playing with their grandchildren. It struck me then that my life had nothing in it besides Michael and his family. "Brenda, I've made up my mind," I announced at dinner that night. "I'm going to live for myself for once." Brenda put a piece of fish on my plate. "What do you mean?" "I'm 69 years old. I don't have many years left," I said, putting down my chopsticks. All these years, every penny I saved went to my son. I barely touched my own retirement money, always thinking I should leave more for them. Now I see how foolish that was. Brenda nodded. "So, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to travel," I said, the decision surprising even myself. When I was young, I always dreamed of seeing the Southwest, but I never had the chance. Her eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful idea. I have a cousin who runs a little bed and breakfast in Santa Fe. I can put you in touch." The next day, I used Brenda's phone to call the county office to get replacements for my ID and senior card. Then I went to the bank to report my savings book as lost. Thankfully, I was the only one who knew the password. A week later, with a temporary ID in hand, I withdrew the $7,000 I had saved over the years. "Are you really leaving?" Brenda asked on the way to the train station, her voice tinged with sadness. I nodded. "You didn't just save my life, Brenda. You saved my soul." She gave me a tight hug. "Message me when you get there." As I sat on the train heading towards Santa Fe, watching the landscape rush by, I felt a sense of release I had never experienced before. For 69 years, I had lived for everyone else. My parents, my husband, my son, my grandson. Now, finally, it was my turn to live for me. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, my son Michael was in a state of utter panic. After they had driven for some distance that night, Jessica had suddenly said, "Don't you think that was too much? In this rain?" It was as if Michael had woken from a trance. He slammed on the brakes and spun the car around. What have I done? I must have been crazy. But when they returned to the spot, I was gone. They called the police, who reviewed the traffic cameras. The footage only showed a blurry figure stumbling toward the rest stop before disappearing into the rain. If anything happens to her, Michael's whole body trembled as he gave his statement at the police station. Jessica was terrified too, but she still tried to sound defiant. Well, she should have just kept her mouth. "Shut up!" Michael screamed at her. "That's my mother." In the following days, they printed hundreds of missing person flyers, posted on every social media platform, and even went on a local news program. But they had no idea that the confused elderly woman with mild dementia, who might not remember her address they were looking for, was already on a southbound train, starting a new life. 3 months later, in Santa Fe, I sat on a bench by the duck pond in the city park, watching the birds glide across the water, a smile playing on my lips. These 3 months had been some of the happiest of my life. Brenda's cousin, Carol, treated me like a sister, showing me every charming street and hidden courtyard in the city. I joined a senior tour group and visited the Grand Canyon and Zion National Park. To my great surprise, in a small gallery in Sedona, I met a group of like-minded seniors. We made a pact to become snowbirds and go to Florida together for the winter, a plan we were already discussing enthusiastically in a group text on the smartphone I had just learned to use. I had changed so much. I had a chic new short haircut, bought a stylish floral dress, and learned how to use mobile payments and call an Uber. Carol said I looked at least 10 years younger. Even my chronic high blood pressure had improved significantly. Today was the first weekend after returning to Santa Fe, and I had arranged to meet Carol at the mall to buy some local crafts to send to Brenda. We were in a small shop picking out turquoise jewelry when a familiar voice made me freeze. "Mom?" I turned around slowly. It was Michael. He looked like he had lost a lot of weight, with dark circles under his eyes. He was holding several shopping bags. Beside him stood a shell-shocked Jessica and Leo. "Grandma!" Leo broke free from Jessica's grasp and ran to hug my legs. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt and hugged my grandson tightly. "Leo, you've gotten so tall." Michael rushed over, looking me up and down. "Mom, you. His gaze fell on my new clothes and hairstyle, then to my glowing complexion. He was speechless. Jessica stood a few feet away, her face pale. "Mom, we've been looking for you for 3 months." I stood up, wiped my tears, and said calmly, "I'm fine. You don't need to worry." Suddenly, Michael fell to his knees. Right there, in the middle of the busy mall, he knelt before me. "Mom, I was wrong," he sobbed like a child. That night, I don't know what came over me. I deserved to die. People started to stare and whisper. Carol tactfully led Leo away to look at some pottery. I looked at my kneeling son, and the peace I had cultivated over the past 3 months shattered. The memories of all the nights I had cried myself to sleep came flooding back. "Get up. Don't make a scene," I said softly. He refused. "Mom, please come home with me. These 3 months have been a living hell. The police said you might. He couldn't finish the sentence. Jessica approached, her head bowed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. That day, I was just so impulsive." I looked at the daughter-in-law, who had once cursed me so viciously, and noticed the new lines around her eyes, the dullness in her hair. I realized then that their past 3 months hadn't been easy either. "I'm not going back for now," I said, voicing the decision I had long since made. "I've rented an apartment here in Santa Fe. I've made a lot of friends." Michael looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, you can't forgive me?" I sighed. "I forgive you, Michael, but I can't go back to living the way I did before." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Son, I've had a lot of time to think. After your father passed away, I placed all my hopes on you. That was my mistake. A mother shouldn't stake her entire existence on her child." Michael stared at me, as if he were seeing me for the first time. "I plan to live here for the long term," I continued. "I'll come back to visit Leo sometimes. And you're always welcome to visit me here." Jessica burst into tears. "Mom, we really know we were wrong. Leo asks where Grandma went every single day." At the mention of my grandson, my heart softened. "I'll video call him often," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let's add each other on Facebook." Michael looked at me, expertly navigating my smartphone, his expression a mixture of shock and awe. "Mom, when did you?" I smiled. "Just because you're old doesn't mean you can't learn new things." We exchanged contact information and agreed to a video call the following week. As they were leaving, Michael suddenly asked, "Mom, were you happy these past 3 months?" I looked out the window at the brilliant New Mexico Sunday. "Yes," I said honestly. "Happier than I've ever been." The look in Michael's eyes was a complex cocktail of guilt, shock, and something I had never seen there before: respect. "That's good," he whispered. "Mom, I patted his shoulder. "Go on now, drive safe." Watching my son and his family walk away, I felt a strange sense of calm. At 69 years old, my life was just beginning. Back in my small rented apartment, I set down the bag of gifts and sat in the rocking chair by the window, lost in thought. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a warm patch of light on the floor. 3 months ago, I could never have imagined I would reunite with my son's family this way. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Carol. "You saw your son. How did it go?" I replied, "It was calmer than I expected. They don't look like they've been doing well." Carol's reply came quickly. "Are you softening?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. Was I? When I saw Michael kneeling on that polished mall floor, sobbing his heart out, I did feel a sharp pain in my chest. He was the child I had carried for 9 months, the flesh and blood I had raised. But strangely, apart from that fleeting pang, what I felt more was a sense of release. "No," I finally typed back. "But I did promise to video call with Leo." Putting my phone down, I went to the small kitchen to start dinner. The 1-bedroom apartment, which Carol had helped me find, was small but bright and affordable. I had learned to cook a few simple Southwestern dishes and planned to try my hand at a green child stew I'd had at a restaurant and couldn't stop thinking about. Just as the stew began to simmer, my phone rang. A video call from Michael. My heart skipped a beat. We had said next week, but it had only been 3 days. When I answered, Leo's round face filled the screen. "Grandma!" he shouted excitedly. Daddy told me to call you. My eyes instantly filled with tears. Leo, you're such a good boy. Have you had dinner yet? He pouted. I want to eat Grandma's pot roast. The camera shook, and I saw Michael's hand on Leo's shoulder. He looked even more haggard than he had at the mall, his stubble more pronounced. Mom, his voice was hoarse. Leo wouldn't stop fussing to see you. I adjusted the phone's angle to show the window behind me and the small succulents on the sill. When you come to visit, I'll make it for you, okay? Grandma, why don't you come home? Leo asked innocently. My little bed is still there. The question was a knife in my heart. Off camera, I heard a soft sniffle. It must have been Jessica. Michael's expression tightened. He quickly changed the subject. Mom, it looks really nice where you are, so much brighter than our house. I went along with it. Yes, it faces south, so it gets great Sunday. And see this? It's a woven blanket I bought in Sedona. Doesn't it look nice on the wall? Michael stared at the screen, his gaze complicated. Are you getting used to living alone? It's wonderful, I said with a genuine smile. There's a farmer's market right downstairs and a small park across the street. A lot of seniors do Tai Chi there in the morning. I've started joining them. Mom, Michael started, then stopped. I'll take some time off next week and come get you. It was so matter-of-fact, just like all the times in the past decade, he had come to take me to the doctor, to their house for the holidays, or to stay with them after my husband died, as if I were an accessory to be picked up and dropped off. That's not necessary, I said, my tone gentle but firm. I want to spend the winter here. The winters in Santa Fe are so pleasant, not cold and damp like back home. My firm refusal, something he had never heard from his mother who always just said okay, was met with a stunned silence. After a moment, Jessica's face appeared at the edge of the screen, her eyes red and swollen. Mom, Leo hasn't been eating well lately. The doctor said there's nothing wrong, he's just being picky. I could almost hear the sound of her gritting her teeth, asking for help from the woman she had called an old hag. It must have been incredibly difficult for her. Try a little ginger ale, I said, catching myself giving the kind of old-fashioned advice she despised. I quickly added, but of course, you should listen to the doctor. To my surprise, Jessica didn't argue. Instead, she took out her phone to make a note. How much should I give him? The question astonished me. We talked for a few more minutes about gentle remedies for an upset stomach, and the atmosphere was surprisingly harmonious. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the edge of the table. Mom, what's wrong? Michael asked, his eyes sharp. Nothing, I said, quickly composing myself. My arm is just getting tired from holding the phone. It's time for Leo to go to bed, isn't it? Michael glanced at the time. Oh, it's almost 9. He hesitated. Mom, we really are sorry. It's in the past, I interrupted. Let's video call again on the weekend. Give Leo a kiss for me. After hanging up, I sank into my rocking chair. The dizzy spell was worse than I'd thought. My blood pressure had indeed improved since coming to Santa Fe, but recently I'd been having these sudden moments of vertigo. I had brushed them off as a normal part of getting older. The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. Hello. May I speak with Helen Miller? A young woman's voice asked. This is she. Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a teacher at the Santa Fe Senior Center. Carol recommended you for our spring classes. We're holding registration now, and I was wondering if you might be interested. I had no idea Carol would do something like that. When I was young, I had always wanted to learn watercolor painting, but between work and raising a family, there was never any time. After retiring, I was too busy taking care of Leo. What kind of classes do you offer? I asked, intrigued. We have watercolor, pottery, photography, smartphone basics, and even line dancing and a choir, Linda said enthusiastically. Hearing the word watercolor, my heart beat a little faster. How much is the tuition? It's $100 for the semester, with a senior discount for those over 65. The price was much more reasonable than I had expected. After hanging up, I did some quick math. My monthly retirement check was about $3,200. Rent was $1,500, and living expenses were about $1,000. That left $700. Before, I would have saved every cent for Leo's college fund. To hell with it, I muttered to myself. I would sign up for the watercolor class, and the smartphone class. Even though I knew the basics, I wanted to learn how to book train tickets online and make doctor's appointments. On registration day, I met Arthur. He was 5 years older than me, a retired middle school art teacher who now taught watercolor at the senior center. He wasn't tall, and his hair was mostly white, but he stood up straight and spoke with a gentle, patient voice. "You're from back east, Helen," he said, looking at my registration form. "Yes, I've been in Santa Fe for 3 months now. And do you like it here?" "I love it. The weather is beautiful, and the people are so kind." He smiled. "If you love painting, the mountains and flowers of New Mexico are the perfect subjects." During our first class, Arthur taught us how to hold the brush. When he came to my station, he gently adjusted my fingers. "Not so tight. Relax. Let the brush do the work." His fingers were warm and dry, and for a moment, they reminded me of my late husband teaching me how to write when we were young. The memory brought a lump to my throat. After class, he stopped me. "Helen, have you studied art before? Your wrist is very steady." I was surprised by his perceptiveness, a little when I was young, but I haven't picked up a brush in decades. "I can tell you have a good foundation," he said, handing me a slip of paper. "This is the address for our art studio. We have free practice hours on the weekends. You should come by." I took the paper, feeling a flutter of a long-forgotten excitement. When I got home, I excitedly called Carol to tell her about the class, but I could tell from her voice that something was wrong. "Helen," my cousin called me. "Michael and his family went to the police station to withdraw the missing person report. They said they found you." My heart sank. "Did he contact you?" "Yes," Carol sighed. "Your son kept apologizing, saying he wants to bring you home." "I didn't tell him your exact address, just that you were doing well in Santa Fe." "Thank you." Carol hesitated. "He said you have a specific blood pressure medication at home. He wanted me to remind you to get a refill." That's when I remembered. I was almost out of one of my prescriptions. Could I get it filled here? Would I need to see a new doctor and get all new tests? As I thought about it, that familiar wave of dizziness returned. "Helen, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I'll go to the clinic tomorrow." I sat on the sofa, lost in thought. Was Michael's call to Carol a genuine act of concern? Or was it a way to find out where I was? Could I trust him again? Outside, the Santa Fe night sky was filled with stars. I looked at the clumsy bamboo leaves I had painted in class and suddenly smiled. At 69, I was learning to paint, learning to doubt my son, learning to make decisions for myself. It all felt so surreal, yet so right. During the third watercolor class, Arthur was teaching us how to paint plum blossoms. I was focused on outlining the delicate petals when the world started to spin. The ink on my paper blurred into a dark smudge, and a buzzing filled my ears. "Helen? Helen?" Arthur's voice seemed to come from far away. I tried to answer, but my lips wouldn't move. The next thing I knew, I was falling forward like a sack of flour. When I woke up again, the harsh white light made me squint. The smell of antiseptic told me I was in a hospital. "She's awake," a young female doctor said, leaning over to check my pupils. "Ma'am, do you know where you are?" "The hospital." My voice was raspy. "What happened to me?" "You had a mild stroke. It's a good thing you were brought in so quickly," the doctor said as a nurse adjusted my IV drip. "You have a history of high blood pressure, right? Have you been taking your medication regularly?" It hit me then. I had run out of that specific medication 3 days ago. I had planned to go to the clinic on the weekend. "We tried calling the contact listed as son in your phone, but we couldn't get through," the nurse said. "Does he have a new number?" I remembered that Michael had called me from a new number after we met at the mall, a number I hadn't saved. "There's a friend." "Carol," I said weakly. Soon, Carol rushed into the hospital, carrying my insurance card and some toiletries. The doctor said I needed to stay for observation for a week. Carol held my hand. "You silly woman. Why didn't you tell me you were out of your medicine?" I apologized with a weak smile. That afternoon, Arthur arrived with a thermos of porridge. "The class sent me as their representative to check on you," he said, placing the thermos on the table and pulling a stack of cards from his bag. These are get well wishes from everyone. I opened the top one. In the shaky handwriting of an 80-year-old classmate, it read, "Helen, get well soon. We're waiting for you to teach us how to mix that perfect shade of green." My eyes filled with tears. "I made the porridge myself," Arthur said, opening the thermos. "It's good for your digestion." Carol gave me a knowing look. "Arthur stayed with you all night. He only just went home this morning to change." I looked at Arthur, astonished. The tips of his ears turned slightly red. "It was nothing. You just focus on getting better. I'll come see you tomorrow." After they left, I finally worked up the courage to ask Carol to help me call Michael. "Are you sure?" she asked. "If they know you're in the hospital, they'll—" "I know," I sighed. "But it was a stroke. They have a right to know." Carol dialed the number and briefly explained the situation. I could hear Michael's voice, suddenly sharp and loud, through the phone. "What hospital? Which room? We're on our way." After she hung up, Carol shook her head. "From the sound of it, he's going to drive through the night to get here." I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. In sickness, one craves family. But I was terrified of going back to being a burden. The next morning, the door to my hospital room was thrown open. Michael rushed in, his face covered in stubble, his eyes bloodshot. A haggard-looking Jessica followed him. "Mom!" Michael stumbled toward my bed, wanting to hug me but afraid to touch anything. "How are you? Does it hurt?" His familiar concern brought a lump to my throat. But then I saw Jessica behind him, clutching a fruit basket, her eyes puffy and her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound strong. "It's just a minor thing." A few days of observation. Just then, the doctor came in for his rounds and explained my condition in detail to Michael. I would need to be on medication long-term, have regular checkups, and it would be best if someone were around to keep an eye on me. After the doctor left, he turned to me. "Mom, when you're discharged, you're coming home with us. Jessica already cleared out the south-facing bedroom for you." I looked at Jessica, stunned. She lowered her head. "Mom, we were wrong before. Leo talks about you every single day. The change was so drastic I couldn't process it." The daughter-in-law who had cursed me was now inviting me into her home. I'm fine here in Santa Fe," I stammered. "So fine you end up in the hospital with no one knowing?" Michael's voice rose. Then he quickly lowered it. "Sorry, Mom, I didn't mean—" Jessica tugged on his sleeve and said to me, "Mom, you get some rest. We're going to talk to the doctor." After they left, I heard their muffled argument in the hallway. "What was that about?" "I thought we agreed to respect her decision," Jessica said. "But she's sick. She needs someone to take care of her," Michael practically growled. "And you're going to quit your job to do that? What about the mortgage, the car payments, Leo's school?" There was a long silence. Then I heard Michael's choked voice. "Jessica, she's my mother. When I was a kid, I had a terrible fever, and she carried me for miles in the snow to get to the hospital. Now she's sick. I can't just—" My heart twisted. He remembered. He remembered everything I had done for him. The argument stopped. A little while later, Michael came back into the room alone, his eyes red. "Mom," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. He asked, so carefully, "Do you really not want to come home?" I looked at his exhausted face and suddenly understood. My refusal wasn't punishing them, it was punishing myself. I longed to be close to my son and grandson, but I was terrified of repeating the past. "It's not that I don't want to go back," I said softly. "I just don't want to be your burden." The tears finally fell from Michael's eyes. "Please," he begged, "let me be your son again." His words broke down all my defenses. I reached out and stroked his messy hair, just as I had when he was a feverish little boy. "Okay," I whispered through my own tears. "But on one condition. Anything. I need my own space and my own time," I said firmly. "I want to go to my art class twice a week, and I want to see my friends." A smile broke through his tears. "Of course, Mom. You should have your own life." Just then, Jessica returned with the doctor, who explained all the post-discharge instructions, emphasizing my need for a quiet, comfortable living environment. "Mom," Jessica said suddenly, "I was doing some research. It's best for seniors with high blood pressure to live in a south-facing room." We'll move out of the master bedroom when we get back." I stared at her, shocked. The master bedroom was their pride and joy, the one they had decorated perfectly for their wedding. "No, you don't have to." "Yes, we do," Jessica said firmly. "Leo can have the guest room. We'll move into the attic." This was too much. I looked at Michael, who seemed just as surprised as I was. Clearly, this was not something they had discussed. The day before I was discharged, Arthur came to help me with the paperwork. Michael was at the pharmacy, and Jessica was packing my things in the room. "Helen," Arthur said, handing me a paper bag. "This is a local herbal supplement. It's supposed to be good for cardiovascular health." "Thank you for everything, Arthur," I said gratefully. "I'm so sorry I have to drop out of your watercolor class." "Don't worry about it," he smiled. "I have a beginner's textbook for you. You can practice at home." He took a book from his bag, and I saw a slip of paper tucked inside. While Jessica wasn't looking, I glanced at it. It was a phone number, and the words, "Call anytime." My heart beat a little faster. Michael returned from the pharmacy and paused when he saw Arthur. "This is Arthur, my watercolor teacher," I explained. "This is my son, Michael." The two men shook hands. I noticed Michael sizing Arthur up, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Mom mentions you often," Michael said. Arthur smiled. "She told me you won an award for a drawing you did as a child." Michael looked at me, surprised. "You still remember that?" "Of course," I said softly. "The picture you drew, my mom, is still in the old photo album." Michael's eyes reddened again. He turned to Arthur. "Thank you for taking care of my mother. She means the world to me." On the day we left Santa Fe, both Carol and Arthur came to see me off. Carol pressed a huge bag of local specialties into my hands. "Call any time you want to come back," she said. Arthur handed me a rolled-up scroll. "A small gift. You can open it on the way." In the car, I carefully unrolled the scroll. It was a beautiful ink wash painting of a single plum blossom with a line of calligraphy that read, "Blooming alone in the cold." Tears fell onto the rice paper. "Mom, that Arthur fellow," Michael said, looking at me in the rear-view mirror. "He's just a teacher," I said quickly, then realized how defensive I sounded. "A very nice, patient teacher." Jessica turned around and gave me a long, meaningful look, but said nothing. As the car sped down the highway, the scenery blurring past, I thought about how, just 3 months ago, I was abandoned on a road just like this, soaked and hopeless. Now, I was sitting in my son's car, carrying gifts from new friends, returning to the home that had once hurt me so deeply. Life was a strange, winding road. I looked out the window and noticed the wildflowers blooming brightly on the roadside. As we pulled into our familiar neighborhood, my heart began to pound. 3 months ago, I had left this place in shame. Now, what role was I returning to? "We're here, Mom," Michael said, turning off the car. "Wait here, I'll carry you upstairs." "No need," I said with a smile. The doctor said a little activity is good for my recovery. The elevator ride up was awkward. Leo clung to my hand as if he were afraid I might vanish again. Jessica stared at the floor numbers, and Michael kept wringing his hands. The apartment door opened, and I gasped. The heavy, dark curtains were gone, replaced with light, airy ones, just like in my Santa Fe apartment. On the coffee table was a blooming orchid, next to the woven placemat I had bought in Sedona. "Your room is this way," Michael said, leading me to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, I nearly cried. It was a near-perfect replica of my little home in Santa Fe. The same beige bedding, the same rocking chair, even a few succulents on the windowsill. The walls were decorated with enlarged, framed photos of the landscapes I had taken on my trip. I was too choked up to speak. "It was Jessica's idea," Michael said softly. "She said you loved your place in Santa Fe, and we wanted you to feel at home." Jessica stood in the doorway, twisting her fingers. "I hope it's to your liking. All the furniture is new." I took her hand. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Leo bounced into the room. "Mommy and Daddy worked on it for days. They wouldn't let me see." Dinner was takeout, but I noticed Jessica had made me a special bowl of porridge, very similar to the one Arthur had brought me. The small gesture warmed my heart. After dinner, Leo insisted I tell him a story. I sat in the rocking chair with him curled in my lap, telling him about my adventures in the Southwest. "Grandma, do the mountains really look like they're painted?" he asked, his eyes wide. "They really do." Grandma saw them with her own eyes. I pulled out my phone to show him pictures. The sound of Jessica washing dishes in the kitchen stopped. She came quietly to the doorway to listen. When I described the 3 stages of a traditional tea ceremony I'd read about, Michael put down his phone and drew closer. "The first cup is bitter, representing the struggles of youth. The second is sweet, for the successes of middle age. And the third has a complex aftertaste, like the wisdom of old age," I explained. "Like life," Michael said suddenly. We all looked at him, surprised by the philosophical thought from my usually practical son. "You're right, Michael," I said, smiling at him. I saw something different in his eyes, a new depth, a kind of peace. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in my familiar home, I sent a message to Carol. "Arrived safely." They decorated my room just like my place in Santa Fe. She replied instantly, "That's thoughtful of them. Arthur says hello." At the mention of his name, a warmth spread through my chest. I opened the scroll he had given me and read the inscription again. At the bottom, in tiny characters, was another line. "The winter plum, tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." The next morning, I woke at my usual 6 o'clock and found Jessica already in the kitchen. "Mom, you're up so early," she said, surprised. "If you need anything, just tell me." "It's a habit," I smiled. "I went for a walk every morning in Santa Fe." Jessica hesitated. "Well, I could walk with you in the community garden. Leo is still asleep." I was touched by the offer. The morning air was crisp and clean. We walked side by side on the tree-lined path, a comfortable silence between us. "Mom," Jessica began, "I am so sorry." I patted her hand. "It's all in the past." "No," she said, shaking her head as tears streamed down her face. "You don't know how much I regret what I said that day. I stopped and gently hugged her. I was at fault too. I was too stubborn. I thought about it every day for 3 months," she sobbed, "wondering if something terrible had happened to you. Leo kept asking if he was the reason you left. My heart ached. Silly boy. It had nothing to do with him." When we got back, Michael was up, clumsily trying to make breakfast. He looked visibly relieved to see us return together. "Mom, what are your plans for today?" he asked at the table. "I was thinking of going to the community center," I said. "I learned some new line dances in Santa Fe. I could teach the ladies here." Michael and Jessica exchanged a look. "I'll drive you." "No need," I said with a smile. "Do you remember where my bus pass is?" Michael stared at me for a moment, then jumped up and started rummaging through a drawer. "Here it is. You still remember how to use it?" "Of course," I said, taking the card. "After your father passed, this card was my companion for 3 years. The ladies at the community center were thrilled to see me. They gathered around as I shared stories of my travels and taught them a few new dance steps. The center's director even invited me to lead a performance at next week's community event. On the way home, I stopped by the pharmacy to refill my prescription and picked up some herbs at the market. I had overheard Jessica telling Michael that Leo was being a picky eater again. That evening, just as I predicted, Leo pushed his food around his plate. Jessica sighed in frustration, but this time, instead of scolding him, she tried to patiently coax him. I quietly went to the kitchen, brewed a mild herbal tea, and placed it on the table. Jessica looked at it, then poured a small cup for Leo. Surprisingly, after a few sips, his appetite seemed to improve. "Mom?" Jessica whispered. "Thank you." In this way, I slowly reintegrated into the family, but on entirely new terms. I was no longer the timid, meddling mother-in-law, but a woman with her own life. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I taught dance at the community center. Every evening from 7 to 8 was my designated painting time. Michael had bought me a complete set of watercolor supplies. On weekends, I would cook pot roast for Leo. Jessica no longer objected, only asking that I use less salt and butter. One day, Michael came home from work early and heard me on a video call in my room. "Arthur, I'm still having trouble with this wash technique. Relax your wrist a bit more, came Arthur's gentle voice from the tablet's speaker. That's it. You're making wonderful progress, Helen. Michael stood outside the door, his expression unreadable. At dinner, he asked casually, Mom, you and that Mr. Arthur keep in touch often? We have a video lesson once a week, I answered honestly. I can't just give up on my painting. Jessica's chopsticks paused midair, but she said nothing. Late that night, I got up for a glass of water and heard them talking softly in the living room. She's at her age. What could possibly happen? Jessica was saying. That's not what I mean, Michael sighed. It's just, these 3 months in Santa Fe, she's like a different person. A better person, don't you think? Jessica replied softly. She's happier, healthier. She has so many friends, and she's even more forgiving with us. Michael's voice was laced with confusion, but sometimes I feel like she doesn't need me anymore. Hearing that, I quietly retreated to my room. My son's words were both heartbreaking and affirming. He was finally learning that love isn't about control, but about letting go. The next day, I offered to teach Michael and Jessica how to paint. Leo joined in the fun, and soon our family was gathered around the coffee table, learning to paint little chicks. Mom, what made you want to learn this? Michael asked, awkwardly holding the brush. I always wanted to learn when I was young, I said, adjusting his grip. But there was never time between work, taking care of your father, and running the house. Jessica looked up. And now? Now, I said, looking at them both, it's time to live for myself. Michael's eyes grew red. He looked down, and a single tear fell onto the paper, blooming like an unexpected little flower. Life settled into a rhythm that was smoother than I expected, though not entirely without its bumps. I maintained my schedule of going to the community center on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, spending the rest of my time at home. This new routine was difficult for Michael to accept at first. Mom, isn't today Thursday? He asked one rainy morning as he saw me putting on my shoes. Yes, it is. The choir has rehearsal, I said, tying my rain boots. But, he hesitated. Jessica has to work late, and I was hoping you could pick up Leo from preschool. I paused. What time does he get out? 4 o'clock. I calculated the time. Rehearsal ends at 3. That's plenty of time. Michael looked relieved, but also a little embarrassed. Or I could just leave work early. I looked him straight in the eye. Michael, I am capable of managing my own schedule. If I need your help, I will ask for it, okay? He blinked, then nodded. We had this type of conversation often over the next few months. His instinct was to manage my life, and my new instinct was to draw a clear boundary. The rain had stopped by the time I got to the preschool. Leo shot out of the classroom like a little cannonball. Grandma, look at the dinosaur I drew. The teacher said it looks like a chicken. He chattered on for a moment before his face fell, and then I pushed him. He looked down at his shoes. The teacher said she needs to talk to my parents. Sure enough, the teacher gently suggested that Leo's parents needed to work with him on his emotional regulation. On the way home, Leo was quiet and sullen. At dinner, when Jessica heard he had gotten into a fight, her first reaction was to scold him. How could you push someone? Haven't I taught you to use your words? Leo's lip began to tremble. I interjected softly. Jessica, can I tell a story? She looked at me, confused, but nodded. In a faraway land, I began, putting down my fork, there was a little tiger cub who was always teasing the other animals. One day, he made fun of the little deer's legs, saying they looked like twigs, and he even kicked a little rabbit. Leo's eyes were wide with attention. And what happened? Well, the wise old owl told the tiger cub that every creature in the forest is special. The deer's legs would heal, and the rabbit's fur would grow back, but the hurt in their hearts might leave a scar forever. Did the tiger cub say sorry? Leo asked. He did. And he also learned to use his eyes to see the beauty in others, I said, stroking his hair. For example, maybe the other boy's drawing had really wonderful colors. Leo thought for a moment. He drew a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was purple. It was pretty cool. Jessica stared at me, a flash of admiration in her eyes. Later that night, as I passed their slightly ajar bedroom door, I heard her say to Michael, "The way your mom tells stories, it works so much better than my lectures." Michael chuckled softly. "I told you. She raised me without ever laying a hand on me." There was an unspoken question hanging in the air between them. "So how did you become a son who would lay a hand on her?" After a long pause, Michael whispered, "Work was so stressful. The mortgage. You were always saying she was spoiling Leo. I forgot how she raised me." My heart clenched, and I quietly walked away. That weekend, Michael suggested a family trip to a new nature preserve. Leo was ecstatic, and Jessica even took the day off. Watching them bustle around, packing a picnic, I thought of Arthur, who had mentioned he'd always wanted to see the fall colors up north. On a whim, I sent him a text message, inviting him to visit if he was ever in the area. I regretted it instantly. What was I thinking? Inviting an outsider to a family gathering? To my surprise, he replied almost immediately, "I would be honored." As it happens, I have a trip planned to the State Museum next week to see an exhibition. Perhaps I could arrive a day early. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. How would I tell Michael and Jessica? What would they think? As I was debating what to do, Michael walked over holding my pill organizer. "Mom, your blood pressure medicine is running low. I put some cash in here for you to get a refill." I opened the case. Tucked inside were 5 crisp $100 bills. On each, written in pencil, were the words, "For treats." A lump formed in my throat. When he was a little boy and our budget was tight, I would give him pocket money with the same note scribbled in the corner. Now, the roles were reversed. "Michael," I began hesitantly, "next Saturday, a friend of mine would like to come over for dinner." "Is it Carol?" "She's more than welcome," he said, not looking up from the picnic basket. "No, it's Arthur. He's coming to town for an exhibit." Michael's movements froze. He slowly looked up. "Just him?" "Yes," I said, suddenly feeling like a child who had done something wrong. "If it's not convenient, it's convenient. Of course it's convenient." His voice was a little too loud. "Any friend of yours is a friend of ours." But his face clearly said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jessica came over to see what the commotion was. "Mom's friend, Mr. Arthur, is coming for dinner next week," Michael said, almost through gritted teeth. Jessica raised an eyebrow, then surprised me by saying, "Oh, that's wonderful. I've been meaning to ask him for some advice. Leo's school is having an art fair, and I want to help him with a project." Michael whipped his head around to stare at his wife, his eyes full of disbelief. The atmosphere in the car, on the way to the preserve, was a little tense. Michael drove aggressively, braking sharply several times. Jessica, on the other hand, was unusually chatty, trying to fill the silence. Leo, oblivious in the back seat, pointed out everything he saw. "Grandma, look, a giant pinwheel," he shouted, pointing to a distant hill where a row of white wind turbines spun slowly in the autumn Sunday. "They're beautiful," I said. "They look a bit like the ones in your photos from Sedona, don't they?" Jessica asked. I was surprised she remembered. "A little," I said, "but the ones in Sedona are closer to the red rocks." Michael glanced at me in the rearview mirror but said nothing. At the preserve, Leo ran wild like a colt let out to pasture. We followed behind, admiring the golden ginkgo trees and fiery red maples. "Mom, let me take a picture of you," Jessica suggested. "The red leaves here are different from the ones in Santa Fe." I stood under a maple tree, looking at my daughter-in-law behind the lens. 3 months ago, this woman had cursed me. Now, she wanted to take my picture. Life was truly strange. Michael walked over quietly and stood behind her, looking at the phone screen. Just as Jessica pressed the shutter button, he reached out and put his arm around my shoulder. In the photo, my expression shifts from surprise to a soft smile. Michael's gaze is tender and complex. The background is a blaze of crimson leaves. When we got home, Michael hid on the balcony to smoke a cigarette. He had quit 5 years ago. His behavior worried me. "I'll go check on him," I said to Jessica. She shook her head. "Let me. You should rest." Through the glass door, I saw them arguing. Michael looked agitated, while Jessica remained calm. Finally, he slumped into a chair, and she gently rubbed his back. At dinner, Michael made a sudden announcement. "Jessica and I were talking. From now on, Sundays will be our official family day. The rest of the week, everyone is free to do their own thing. And for the day your friend visits, I'll do the cooking." The concession was so abrupt that I looked at Jessica, who gave me a subtle wink. That evening, I got a video call from Arthur to show me a painting he was working on. "This is based on the landscape you described from your hometown," he said, holding up an unfinished canvas. We spent a half-hour discussing brush strokes, completely unaware that my bedroom door had been quietly pushed open, then closed again. The next morning at breakfast, Michael had dark circles under his eyes. "Mom, you and Mr. Arthur were talking pretty late last night." "Oh, did we disturb you?" I asked, feeling guilty. "No, not at all," he said, then added, "He seems to admire you a lot." Jessica kicked him under the table. I put down my chopsticks, deciding it was time to be direct. "Arthur is a very good friend. He taught me to appreciate beauty again." I chose my words carefully. "Just like Santa Fe taught me to be independent." Michael's hand trembled, spilling porridge on the table. "I'm sorry," he said, frantically wiping it up. "Michael," I said softly, "you will always be my son. That will never change." He froze, tears welling in his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I'm just scared." "Scared of what?" I asked gently. "Scared that you don't need me anymore," the tall grown man confessed, his voice breaking like a child's. Jessica quietly took Leo from the table. I walked around and hugged my son's head to my chest. "Silly boy," I murmured. "A mother's need for her child never ends. It just changes." After Leo left, the atmosphere in the house subtly shifted. Michael no longer showed anxiety about my social activities, and Jessica often sought my advice on parenting. We seemed to have found a new equilibrium. That weekend, I packed a small bag for a reunion at the senior center in Santa Fe, organized by Carol to celebrate its anniversary. "How many days will you be gone?" Michael asked, leaning against the doorframe. 3 or 4. "Is Arthur going to be there?" "Yes, he's a guest of honor." Michael was silent for a moment. "Mom, are you happy?" The question made me pause and reflect. "Yes," I said. "I am. I have you. I have my friends. I have my own life. I feel very fulfilled." He nodded, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "For treats." I opened it and gasped. It was a plane ticket. "Michael, this is too expensive. You're worth it," he smiled. "You've taught me so much, including how to be a better son." The night before I left, Jessica gave me a new smartphone stand. "This will make it easier to video chat. Leo can see you whenever he misses you." I hugged her. "Thank you for everything." The next day, Michael's family took me to the station. Leo clung to my leg. "Grandma, take lots of pictures of the big mountains for me." I kissed his cheek. Michael put my suitcase on the train. "Mom, have a great time," he said. "If you miss us, just call. I'll come get you. Not come home soon, but have a great time." His words brought tears to my eyes. As the train pulled away, I watched the 3 of them waving on the platform and understood. Home wasn't a cage, it was a harbor. A place you could always sail from and always return to. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Arthur. "See you tomorrow. I look forward to hearing your new stories." I smiled and replied, "I have so many to share." Outside the window, the world rushed by. At 69, I was writing the freest chapter of my life. I had roots, and I also had wings. The Santa Fe sun streamed through the hotel window. I stretched and checked my phone. 8 in the morning. The reunion at the senior center started at 10. Carol had booked a hotel for me close to the venue, so we old gals could chat all night, as she put it. I had 3 unread messages. The first was from Michael. "Mom, did you get there okay? Leo drew a picture for you." Attached was a colorful, wobbly drawing of a person labeled Grandma. I smiled, saved the picture, and replied, "Tell Leo his drawing is much better than Grandma's." The second was from Jessica. "Mom, don't forget your medicine. The temperature changes a lot in Santa Fe, so dress warmly." This level of concern was unimaginable 3 months ago. I texted back my thanks and promised to bring them some local cookies. The third was from Arthur. "See you at the center. I have a surprise for you." It was followed by a smiley face emoji. My heart did a little flip, a reaction I quickly told myself was inappropriate. As I washed my face, the person in the mirror seemed like a stranger. Her hair was short and stylish, her complexion rosy, even the wrinkles around her eyes seemed softer. Was this really the same woman who had been left to die in a rainstorm, filled with despair? The reunion was in the senior center's main hall. The moment I walked in, Carol rushed over to hug me. "Helen, I've missed you so much." Behind her were 24 of my former classmates, all beaming. Surprise! Arthur stepped out from the crowd, holding a beautifully mounted scroll. "This is for you." He unrolled it to reveal a stunning, intricate painting of a peony, with the inscription, "Tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." "Arthur," I whispered, my fingers lightly touching the petals, "this is too much." "Not nearly as precious as the painting of the city park you gave me," he said with a smile, referring to the clumsy, amateurish piece I had insisted on giving him before I left. Carol nudged me. "He stayed up for nights finishing that, you know." "Nonsense," Arthur said, his ears turning red. "Don't listen to her, Helen." Amid the laughter, a sharp pain shot through my chest, radiating down my left arm. The room went dark, and the scroll slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. "Helen! Helen!" A chorus of voices exploded around me, but all I could see was Arthur's face, wide with terror. Then, the world went black. When I woke, the familiar smell of antiseptic told me I was back in the hospital. A young doctor was checking the monitors. "She's awake," he said, leaning over. "Ma'am, do you know where you are?" "The hospital." My voice was a rough whisper. "What happened?" "You had a heart attack." "It's a good thing you were brought to the ER so quickly," he said, adjusting my IV. "We'll need to do an angiogram and possibly put in a stent. Is your family here?" "Family." The word made my throat ache. I shakily reached for my phone on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. "Here it is," Arthur said from the doorway. He rushed to my bedside and handed me the phone. "Carol is taking care of the paperwork. I brought all your things." The doctor looked from him to me. "And you are?" "A friend," Arthur answered quickly, though his ears were red again. I took the phone, my son's contact name staring back at me, a painful reminder of that night on the highway. Was I now, once again, the needy mother calling for help? My thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before I finally pressed it. "Mom," Michael's voice was cheerful. "Are you having fun at the reunion?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's wonderful. I'm just at the hospital for a routine checkup." The doctor suggested an angiogram. There was a sudden silence on the other end, followed by muffled sounds, and then Jessica's voice. "Mom, which hospital are you at?" "We're coming right now." "No, don't be silly," I said weakly. "Leo has school." "Mom," Michael's voice was suddenly stern. "Tell me the truth. What happened?" It was the same tone he used when I tried to hide a fever from him as a child. A mother knows her son, and a son knows his mother. "It's my heart," I finally admitted. "It's serious." Less than 10 minutes after I hung up, Carol rushed into the room. "Helen, Michael said he's driving through the night to get here. He told me to tell you not to be afraid, that he's got everything under control." His words, relayed through a friend, made the tears I'd been holding back finally fall. The same son who had abandoned me in the rain was now racing through the night to save me. The procedure was scheduled for the next morning. Arthur insisted on staying the night, no matter how much I protested. Late that night, the pain returned, sharp and terrifying. I curled into a ball, biting my lip to keep from crying out. "Helen," Arthur noticed immediately. He took my hand. "Is it bad?" I nodded, cold sweat drenching my hospital gown. He pressed the call button for the nurse and, with his other hand, began applying gentle pressure to a point on my wrist. "Breathe with me, Helen." Slowly, after a nurse gave me a painkiller, just before I drifted off, I heard Arthur tell the doctor, "Her son will be here in the morning. She's a very strong woman. She never likes to show her weakness." His words made me think of when Michael was little and sick, how I would stay up all night sponging him down, then pretend to be full of energy for work the next day. He had seen my strength. He understood. When I opened my eyes again, it wasn't Arthur sitting by my bed, but Michael, his face haggard and his eyes bloodshot. "Michael," I whispered, unable to believe he was there. So fast. "Did you speed?" He managed a weak, raspy smile. "Got 3 tickets. It was worth it." I noticed his suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. "I took the earliest flight." He squeezed my hand. "Mom, the doctors told me everything. You need the angiogram and maybe a stent. They need a family member to sign the consent forms." I looked at his exhausted face and realized that in the eyes of the law, I was now an old woman who needed her son's permission to be treated. The thought made my throat tighten. "I'm sorry to trouble you," I whispered. Michael's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Mom, don't ever say that." Before the procedure, the doctor explained all the risks. Michael listened intently, asking sharp, intelligent questions, like the engineer he wasn't. When it came time to sign the forms, his hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. "Don't be scared," I found myself comforting him. "It's a minor procedure." He forced a smile. "I know. My mom is the bravest person I know." The angiogram revealed a severe blockage. As they wheeled me into the operating room, I saw Michael at the end of the hall on the phone, his back rigid with tension. The surgery was a success. When I was back in my room, Jessica and Leo were there. Leo ran to my bed, but Jessica quickly pulled him back. Gently, "Grandma's sore." "I'm not sore," I smiled weakly. "Come here, let Grandma see you." Jessica's eyes were red, her usual perfect makeup slightly smudged. "Mom, you scared us to death." Michael stood behind her, holding a stack of papers. "It's all taken care of," he said. "A private room, the best cardiologist in the hospital." That evening, Jessica took Leo to a hotel to rest, and Michael insisted on staying the night. I woke up thirsty in the middle of the night and saw him sitting in the chair by the window, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "Michael?" He jumped, quickly wiping his face. "Mom, do you need something?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, pouring me a glass of water. "Go back to sleep." But I could see the tear tracks on his cheeks. I insisted, and finally he broke down. I almost lost you again," he sobbed, kneeling by my bed. "That night, when I left you in the rain. What's the difference between me and my father?" The words hit me like lightning. My husband, his father, had been a man with a violent temper, especially when he drank. When Michael was 10, he had watched his father slap me across the face. He had launched himself at the man, biting his hand, and had been beaten for it. That night, holding my bruised and battered son, I had sworn I would leave him. "Michael," I said, my voice trembling as I stroked his hair, "you are nothing like your father." "How am I different?" he cried, looking up at me with a pain I had never seen before. "I hit you too. I became the monster." So that was it. For 30 years, he had lived in the shadow of his father's abuse. I forced myself to sit up, ignoring the ache in my chest, and pulled him into a tight hug. "Listen to me. That night, after you left, you came back looking for me, didn't you? Your father never would have." He wept in my arms, a 38-year-old man crying like a lost child. I just held him, patting his back, just like I did when he had nightmares as a little boy. The next afternoon, Arthur arrived with his thermos. He stopped short when he saw Michael, then politely introduced himself. "Mr. Arthur," Michael said, surprising me by extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you. Thank you for taking care of my mother." "It was my duty as a friend," Arthur said, a little flustered. "I made some soup. It's good for the heart." As he served the soup, I noticed Michael watching him, and I suddenly asked Arthur, "Weren't you a doctor before you retired?" "A middle school art teacher," Arthur replied with a smile. "Healthy cooking is just a hobby." Over the next few days, Arthur visited daily, each time with a different healthy meal and a hand-drawn get-well card. Michael's attitude toward him slowly shifted from suspicion to respect. He even started asking Arthur for advice on diet and nutrition. On the 5th day, I woke from a nap to find Arthur standing by my bed, gently brushing a stray piece of hair from my forehead. At that exact moment, Michael walked in carrying a bag of fruit. The two men froze, staring at each other. Arthur quickly pulled his hand back. I just came to drop off some soup." Michael walked into the room silently, set down the fruit, and said, "Thank you for everything you've done for my mom." After Arthur left, Michael sat by the bed, peeling an apple. "Mom," he said casually, "Mr. Arthur seems like a nice man." My heart skipped a beat. "But," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "at your age, you need to be careful with new friends. Your heart can't take too much excitement." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What are you talking about?" He grinned, scratching his head. "Okay, forget I said anything." The next afternoon, Jessica came to relieve Michael. She insisted on helping me with a sponge bath. This was the same daughter-in-law who used to subtly complain about my old people smell, now carefully and gently washing my arms and back. Her fingers paused on a faint scar on my lower back. "This is from when I had Michael," I explained. "He was a breech birth. I needed a C-section." Jessica's hand trembled. "The scar is so long." "The surgical techniques weren't as good back then," I said lightly. "You women have it so easy now, with epidurals and everything." Suddenly, she started to cry, her tears falling onto my back. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never knew." I turned and took her hand. "It's all in the past." The day before I was discharged, the doctor gave us a long list of instructions. Michael diligently typed everything into his phone while Jessica was on her phone with our local clinic, arranging for follow-up care. "Mom," Michael said after the doctor left, "Jessica and I have been talking. When you get back?" I tensed, afraid he would insist I move in with them. "We rented a small, ground-floor apartment with a little yard for you, just a 5-minute walk from our place." He smiled. "You'll have space for a garden, and Leo can come visit you right after school." The arrangement was so unexpectedly perfect, so thoughtful. It gave me both independence and support. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. On the drive home, Michael drove with extreme care, constantly checking on me in the rearview mirror. Jessica kept turning around to ask if I was warm enough, if I needed a drink. Leo sat beside me, chattering away about preschool. The sun streamed through the windows, warm and comforting. I thought of the inscription on Arthur's painting. "Tempered by frost, grows more fragrant." Maybe that's what life was. You had to go through the storms to truly appreciate the bloom. The small apartment was, in fact, a beautifully furnished 2-bedroom unit in a lovely senior living community right next to their neighborhood. The ground floor unit opened onto a small patio with a table, chairs, and several large flower pots. "The clinic is right across the street," Jessica said, helping me inside. "And there's a grocery store and pharmacy on site." The apartment was filled with light, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto a small garden. The bedroom was simple, with a single bed, a small desk, and the framed photos from my trip hanging on the wall. "Do you like it?" Michael asked anxiously, setting down my bags. "We tried to match the style of your place in Santa Fe." I looked around, my throat tight. "I love it. But it must be so expensive." Michael and Jessica exchanged a smile. "Mom," Michael said, "we didn't rent it. We bought it." "You bought it?" I nearly fell over. "How could you? You have a mortgage." "I got a promotion last year," he said. "And besides, Jessica and I owed you this." "Please, Mom, just relax and enjoy it," Jessica added. "We've arranged for a cleaning service to come twice a week, and you can either eat at the community dining hall or cook for yourself." I sank onto the sofa, speechless. This was more than I could have ever dreamed of. It was independence, but without the loneliness. "What about Leo?" I asked. "He'll be here right after school," Jessica laughed. "He was our project supervisor for decorating this place. He insisted that you needed a dinosaur pencil holder on your desk." The image of my grandson, diligently placing a T-Rex on my desk, made me smile. After I was settled, Michael took me to the community clinic. A kind, middle-aged doctor reviewed my medical history and gave me an emergency alert bracelet. "If you feel any discomfort, just press this red button. Someone is on call 24 hours a day," she explained to Michael, who took notes on everything. He even asked questions I hadn't thought of, like whether I could still do line dancing or have an occasional glass of red wine. On the way back, I asked him, "Michael, how do you know so much about cardiac care?" Pushing my wheelchair, he answered quietly, "I've done a lot of reading these past 3 months." I realized then that he had been preparing for this day ever since I had disappeared. As promised, Leo burst through the door the moment he got out of school. "Grandma, where's my dinosaur pencil holder?" he yelled, running to the desk. Satisfied that it was in its proper place, he pulled a small paper packet from his backpack. "For you, Daddy and I got them." I opened it. Inside were a few sunflower seeds. "The teacher said if we plant them now, they'll bloom in the summer," Leo explained excitedly. "They'll be even taller than me." Holding the tiny seeds, I thought of the towering golden sunflowers in Arthur's garden in Santa Fe, always facing the Sunday. "Let's plant them tomorrow, shall we?" I said, pulling Leo into a hug. That evening, Michael and Jessica insisted on having our first family dinner in my new home. Jessica brought over a few simple, healthy dishes, and Michael produced a bottle of red wine. "The doctor said a little is good for the heart," he announced proudly, pouring me a small glass. As we raised our glasses, Michael's voice cracked. "Welcome home, Mom." Those 3 words unleashed a torrent of tears. This wasn't a return to their home. This was a return to my own home. My new life began. Every morning at 7, Leo would arrive like a little alarm clock to walk with me to his bus stop. Afterwards, I would do my exercises in my little yard and water my sunflower seeds. I quickly made friends with the other residents, many of whom had similar living arrangements. We started a morning exercise group, a choir, and a book club. The vibrant community reminded me of my time in Santa Fe. One day, while unpacking, I found the set of paints and the unfinished canvas Arthur had given me. After some hesitation, I gave him a video call. "Helen," he said, his face lighting up the screen. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," I said, showing him my little yard. "Look, I'm about to plant sunflowers." We chatted for a while, and he told me that everyone at the senior center missed me. Before we hung up, he said, "I've put together a portable art kit for you, for painting outdoors. I'll mail it to you." I started to refuse, but the words that came out were, "Thank you, Arthur." The package arrived 3 days later. Inside the beautiful art kit was a small card, "For when you've recovered, we'll paint together again. The sunflowers of Santa Fe miss you. A." I tucked the card into the bottom of my pill organizer like a schoolgirl hiding a love letter. The next day, Michael came by with soup and saw me organizing my medication. His eyes fell on the hastily closed pill box, then to my flushed cheeks. He smiled knowingly. "Did you get a package from Mr. Arthur?" I nodded, embarrassed. "That's nice," he said, surprising me. "It's good to have people who care about you." Then he went about serving the soup as if nothing had happened, leaving me stunned. As my strength returned, I began to paint again. At first, it was just random images, but soon a theme emerged. The storm, the taillights on the highway, the warm glow of the rest stop. I called the series The Stormy Night. The first time Michael saw them, he stood before the easel for a long time without speaking. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "is this how you saw it that night?" I realized then that the paintings were from my perspective, a perspective he had never considered. "It's in the past," I said lightly. "Painting is just part of my therapy." In May, my Stormy Night series was accepted into the city's senior art exhibition. To my surprise, one of the paintings won the award for Most Emotionally Resonant. Michael took the day off work to bring the whole family to the award ceremony. "My grandma is a famous artist," Leo proudly announced to everyone. One of the judges told a reporter, "Her work has a power that goes straight to the heart. That resilience, that search for hope in the midst of despair, is deeply moving." After the exhibit, Michael quietly bought the painting and hung it in the most prominent spot in their living room. One day in June, Jessica rushed over with Leo. He had gotten into another fight at school. "This is the second time," she said, furious. "He needs to be punished." Leo sat in the corner, his face a mask of stubbornness. "Why did you fight?" I asked him gently. He said, "I don't have a grandma," Leo sniffled. "He said my grandma was dead." My heart ached. I hadn't realized my disappearance had left such a deep scar. "Jessica," I said, leading her to the kitchen, "do you remember the story I told about the little tiger cub?" She looked at me, and a wave of understanding crossed her face. "You mean?" I nodded. Sometimes, a story is more powerful than a punishment. That night, I heard Jessica in Leo's room, telling him a new story about a little fawn who was misunderstood, her voice gentle and firm. In July, my sunflowers bloomed, their golden heads towering over Leo, just as he had predicted. I sent a picture to Arthur, who replied, "The sunflowers in Santa Fe are blooming too. I hope they can meet someday." Michael saw me smiling at my phone. "What did Mr. Arthur say, Mom?" he teased. "He said you should mind your own business," I retorted, playfully swatting at him. He dodged, laughing like a boy. As summer drew to a close, we had a barbecue in my little yard. Afterwards, I brought out a folder. "There's something I want to talk to you about," I said, trying to sound casual. "This is my will and my final arrangements." The beer can in Michael's hand nearly slipped. "Mom, why are you talking about this?" "At my age, these things need to be taken care of," I said calmly. "I've put both of your names on the deed to this apartment. My savings are to be divided 3 ways, between the 2 of you and Leo. My insurance policy is in the nightstand drawer. The password is Leo's birthday. And, if something happens to me, please let Carol and Arthur in Santa Fe know." Michael's eyes were red, but he didn't have an outburst like he would have in the past. He took a deep breath and accepted the folder. "Mom, we respect your wishes, but you have to promise us you'll take care of yourself and live to be 100. 101? Leo piped in, making us all laugh. Late that night, after Jessica and a sleepy Leo had gone home, Michael stayed to help me clean up. "Mom," he said suddenly, "thank you for giving us a chance to make things right." I stopped what I was doing and looked at my son, who now stood a full head taller than me. "And thank you, Michael," I said, "for giving me the chance to be myself again." In the moonlight, we smiled at each other, and all the pain and resentment of the past melted away into a quiet understanding. The gentle October sun warmed my small yard. The sunflowers had gone to seed, their heavy heads drooping. I sat on the stone bench, watching Leo concentrate on his drawing pad. It was his first official art lesson with me. "Grandma, look at my son." He held up his drawing of a wobbly yellow circle. "It's wonderful," I said, stroking his hair. "You know, my first drawing was a sun, too." "Did your mommy teach you how to draw?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. My mother, a woman from the countryside who had never held a paintbrush, had taught me how to roll dumpling wrappers, how to mend clothes, how to find joy in a life of scarcity, but not how to draw. "No, sweetie. My mother taught me other things," I said softly, "like how to make dumplings." "Then you can teach me how to make dumplings." His eyes lit up. "Okay, this weekend, when your mom and dad come over, we'll all make them together." Just then, the yard gate opened, and Michael walked in carrying a large box. "Mom, Leo, look what I've got." Leo dropped his drawing pad and ran over. "Cake. I smell cake." "You've got a good nose," Michael laughed, setting the box down. "Mom, your birthday is tomorrow. Jessica ordered a cake for the party, but this one is for you. We can put it in your fridge." I had completely forgotten. Tomorrow was October 18th, my 70th birthday. A year ago, I was lying awake in their guest room, listening to them argue about how I was spoiling Leo. "You shouldn't have," I said automatically. "Yes, we should have," Michael said, crouching down to my level. "Mom, 70 is a big one, and Jessica has invited all your friends." He gave me a mischievous wink, "Including Mr. Arthur." My heart fluttered. He's coming?" "Yes. He's flying in from Santa Fe," Michael said softly. "Are you happy, Mom?" I looked into my son's caring eyes and understood. This was his way of making up for that night in the rain. "I'm happy," I said, patting his hand. "But what makes me happiest is seeing the man you've become." Michael's eyes reddened. He pretended to fuss with the cake box. "Leo, can you help Daddy take this inside?" After Leo had triumphantly carried the box indoors, Michael took a piece of paper from his briefcase. "Mom, I found something. I was hoping I could read it at your party tomorrow." It was a yellowed page from a diary, the edges soft with age, covered in a child's scrawling handwriting. "My mom. Remember?" Michael asked softly. "I wrote it when I was 10. It won an award. You kept it in the photo album all these years." I made a copy. I took the paper, and an image flashed in my mind. a small boy, running home, waving a certificate in the air. That was before his father's drinking started, when our small family was poor but full of hope. Tomorrow, Michael's voice choked, I want to read it in front of everyone, so they all know what a wonderful mother I have. I pulled him into a hug. He no longer smelled of rain and anger, but of a quiet strength. The next day, Jessica showed up with a makeup artist. I laughed, but she insisted. Mom, you have such beautiful skin, the makeup artist said. Jessica, who used to mock my old-fashioned beauty remedies, now smiled and said, My mom has always taken great care of herself, haven't you, Mom? We looked at each other and smiled. The restaurant was a beautiful, traditional-style building. When we walked in, I was stunned. The main hall was filled with more than a dozen tables, bustling with people. There were my friends from the dance class and the community center, Michael's colleagues, Jessica's friends, and even Carol, who had flown in from Santa Fe and was waving at me. Helen, over here, she called. I walked over and saw she was sitting next to Arthur. He stood up, looking especially handsome in a dark blue suit. Arthur, I said, at a loss for words. He handed me a long brocade box. Happy birthday, Helen. A small token. I opened it. Inside was an exquisite paintbrush, the handle engraved with a phrase, At 70, following the heart's desire. This is too precious, I murmured. Not as precious as your paintings, he said with a warm smile. After a few toasts, Michael tapped his glass for attention. Today is my mother's 70th birthday, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I'd like to read something I wrote when I was 10 years old. He pulled the copied page from his pocket. My mom is the best mom in the world. She wakes up very early to make me breakfast. When I'm asleep, she is still mending my clothes. Once, I had a high fever, and my mom carried me to the hospital. She fell down on the way, but she held me tight so I wouldn't get hurt. Michael's voice broke. Jessica went to his side and took his hand. My mom's hands are rough, but they feel so gentle. My mom says you should be like bamboo, straight on the outside, but hollow on the inside, upright and humble. When I grow up, I will make sure my mom has a good life, so she never has to work so hard again. The room was silent. Many of the older guests were dabbing their eyes. After the last line, Michael was weeping openly. He walked over to me and knelt down. Mom, I failed you. I made you suffer. I pulled him up, my own tears flowing. Silly boy. I was never angry with you. Jessica came over and gave me a deep bow. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so immature. I wrapped one arm around my son and the other around my daughter-in-law. Leo ran up and hugged my legs. 3 generations, crying and laughing together as the room erupted in applause. After the party, as guests were leaving, Arthur approached me. Helen, could we speak for a moment? We walked out to the hotel garden. Helen, he began, taking a deep breath. I came here not just to celebrate your birthday, but to ask you a question. My heart sped up. I knew what was coming. Would you be willing to spend the rest of your years with me? Not as a student, but as a partner. This confident, articulate man was now as nervous as a schoolboy. I looked at the garden around me, my mind racing. A year ago, I was a pathetic old woman, abandoned in the rain. Now, I had my own home, my own life, and the possibility of love. Arthur, I said finally, my voice soft, I cherish our friendship more than you know, but my roots are here now, with Leo and Michael. The light in his eyes dimmed for a second, but then returned. I understand, he said. Can we still be friends? Of course, I said, taking his hand. You will always be my best teacher and my dearest friend. On the drive home, Michael watched me in the rearview mirror. Mom, what did Mr. Arthur want to talk about? I smiled. He invited me to go painting in Santa Fe. Michael was quiet for a moment. And what do you think? I told him I might visit sometime, I said, looking out the window. But my home is here. The only home I need is where you all are. In the mirror, I saw my son's face break into a smile of pure relief. Life settled back into its peaceful, fulfilling rhythm. In early November, my Stormy Night series was featured in a citywide art exhibition, and a local paper wrote an article about me titled, An Artist Reborn. Michael proudly framed the article and kept it on his desk at work. Arthur and I continued our weekly video calls, and sometimes Michael would even join in, asking for advice on what kind of art supplies to buy for me. On the first weekend of December, the whole family gathered in my small yard to make dumplings. Leo's creations were lopsided, but everyone praised his efforts. Jessica, whom I had recently taught, now expertly pinched the edges. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, "the city's senior college is opening a new branch at the community center. Mr. Arthur recommended you as a guest lecturer." "Me? A lecturer?" I said, dropping a dumpling. "Yes, to teach introductory watercolor," Michael smiled. "He said you were his most talented student." I looked at Jessica, who nodded enthusiastically. "You should do it, Mom. It's only 2 classes a week. I can pick up Leo." And so, I became Professor Helen. My students were all my age, and our classes were filled with as much laughter as art. For Christmas, Michael gave me a large, mysterious gift. It was a professional easel and a gold-embossed certificate of membership to the National Senior Artists Association. "You deserve a bigger stage, Mom," he said proudly. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. In my little yard, the seeds for next year's sunflowers lay sleeping under the earth. I looked at my son's mature, kind face and thought of his twisted, angry expression on that stormy night. It felt like a lifetime ago. Wounds heal. Misunderstandings fade. As long as there is love, even the coldest winter will eventually give way to spring. "Michael," I said, patting his hand, "the proudest accomplishment of my life is having a son like you." He hugged me tightly, just like he did when he was a little boy. "Grandma, look at the dumpling I made." Leo ran over, holding up a lopsided creation. I took the small dumpling, which held the hopes of 3 generations, and placed it gently on the tray. "It's perfect," I said. "Let's go cook them." As the steam rose from the pot, I could almost see next summer's golden sunflowers blooming in the yard, and my grandson, my little Leo, sitting among them, painting his first perfect flower.